Okay, yes. Good morning, and thank you for coming to this final debate. And it's my pleasure to introduce the motion today. The motion is that this House believes that the nuclear power is the best option for energy production. So I look to Madame Uriarte in order to open the case for the proposition.
Thank you, Madam President. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here today before you all as a speaker on this panel. As the first proposition speaker, it falls upon me to open the case in favor of today's motion. The discourse surrounding this issue has been an ongoing matter for many years now, and today I propose the notion that nuclear power is in fact the most beneficial to us all. I will discuss several points in my attempt to convince you of this, the main ones being its lack of carbon emissions and radiation in comparison to other energy source production, and the complexities of the nuclear power disasters and its comparison to other more lethal industry accidents. First of all, I would like to address the fact that nuclear power is in fact one of the energy sources with the less carbon emission known to man. To understand this, one must know that nuclear power is achieved through a process that has its basis on physics. Through the fission of atoms, electricity is created without any kind of burning of fuel, and therefore there is no carbon emission. Carbon emission, those two words that many of us dread as we link them with our increasingly meteorologically destabilized planet. The same two words that embody the global crisis we are all facing and fighting. It's the same people that are fighting this crisis that are against nuclear power, so it seems a bit contradictory that they fight against the very thing that could stabilize it. Nuclear power plants only emit CO2 with their ancillary use, which entails such things as maintenance, decommissioning, and building of the facilities. This same ancillary use is used in and emitted in solar power plants and other greener options. I would also like to discuss the fact that nuclear power does not emit nearly as much radiation as other types of power plants. It is an almost unknown fact that non-nuclear energy sources release any radiation into the environment, but that does not mean it is not true. Coal is a mineral extracted from below the Earth's surface, from its crust to be precise, and though its full composition is of little importance to us at this time and place, I would like you all to take notice of the fact that it contains large amounts of uranium and thorium, which are both radioactive minerals. When carbon is burnt, the smoke that it produces, called fly ash, is one of the main environmentally unfriendly and the biggest environmentally damaging radiation of all the energy producing methods. So it seems that, environmentally speaking at least, it is not the worst option after all. Now I would like to discuss the terrible incidents that are nuclear power plant accident, because they are terrible, and I will by no means try to dissuade you of the fact. But I would like to reiterate that they are just accidents, that they are mere accident, unfortunate events, incidents, and that happened unexpectedly and, most importantly, unintentionally. There have been 3 great accidents happening in the last 100 years since the nuclear power plants started. 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, Chernobyl in the Ukraine, and Fukushima in Japan. In the 3 Mile Island reactor meltdown, people in the surrounding area of the plant received only 1 millirem of radiation above the standard background dose, which in the US tallies up to 100 and 125 millirems a year. To put this rather minuscule dosage of radiation into perspective, I would like you to know that in a chest radiation and chest X-ray, it emits about 6 millirems of dosage. So one could say that apart from the damage done to the reactor and the facilities themselves, damage to both humans and animals and the environment were minimal and noticeable and almost inexistent. The data I just given you was provided by the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Now let's address the elephant in the room, Chernobyl. The accident of Chernobyl was caused by an explosion and burnout of a water-cooled reactor. 29 workers were immediately killed due to the spike of the radiation in the area, but UNSCAR, which is a branch of the UN, the United Nations, reported that there were no long-term health issues found in adults. UNCR also reported that while evacuees received about 35 millisieverts, which I will explain in a minute, due to active exposure, people who lived in the now inexistent Soviet Union only received one dosage and 1 millisievert above the average, which is 1/1000th of a sievert. And for those of you who do not know, sieverts are radiation measurement units. If we compare this to other and more lethal industrial accidents, such as the Bhopal incident in India, and which had 3,800 immediate deaths and thousands more in the aftermath of the consequently contaminated waters, and the incident in Henan province in China, with 26,000 people drowning immediately in the failure of a major hydroelectric dam in a typhoon, we will find that the ratio of death to productivity is up to 49 times higher in the hydroelectric stations, which are just numbers, I must admit, but these numbers represent lives, people's lives. So what have I told you? What have I told you today? Ecologically speaking, nuclear electricity and nuclear energy is less damaging to the environment than other energy sources such as carbon, because it produces less CO2 and less radiation. And in terms of the very pronounced and very well-known nuclear power plant accidents and disasters, there have been many other disasters and accidents in other electricity source and energy source industries, such as the hydraulic energy industry, that have been much more lethal and much more damaging to the environment and to us. Thank you. Proud to propose.
Okay. Thank you, Madame Uriarte. Now I look to Madame de la Varga in order to open the case for the opposition.
Madam President, thank you very much for presenting me. It is both an honor and a privilege to speak on this panel today. Nuclear power, since its first use in the creation of the first atomic bomb back in 1945, has become the most popular energy production. And even though nowadays the vast majority of electricity is created by nuclear power, I'd like to take issue with what the proposition speaker has said today. And it falls upon me to defend why nuclear power is not our best option for energy production for two main reasons. The first one being the environmental impact it has, and the second one, the effects it causes on human health. The first point I would like to raise is the environmental impact that nuclear energy has. Moreover, we have three crucial factors that cause big damage to the environment. The first one, the process of building the nuclear plant. The second one, the large amount of toxic waste they produce. And the third one, the vulnerability of these plants and the danger that comes with them. To begin with, the process of building a nuclear plant is long and damaging to nature. It takes about 12 years to be built, which in the worst case can be elongated to 20. Furthermore, they need to be built near a river or coastline, that is to say, near any cooling waterway. Consequently, this heightens the probability of toxic waste ending up in our oceans or rivers, and endangering a species such as fish or any kind of aquatic animals. Besides that, another big concern of the construction is the transport of radioactive material, such as plutonium, for example, which is considered, even in small doses, highly toxic, leading to radiation illness, cancer, and often death. You can find many examples in real life. According to CSN, Consejo de Seguridad Nuclear, in Spain, between the years 2000 and 2020, there have been a total of 100 incidents while transporting this kind of material, by endangering the transporter's life and those around them. Another thing to consider is the large amount of toxic waste these plants produce, which is highly dangerous to health and the environment, and takes hundreds of years to degrade. And although nuclear waste is locked up in nuclear cemeteries, sealed and isolated, underground or sometimes at the bottom of the ocean, this problem The problem is that this is a short-term solution and it's not definitive, since the period of the radioactivity of these wastes is longer than the life of their protective containers. To sum up this first argument, we shouldn't forget the vulnerability of nuclear plants. To do so, it's vital to remember tragedies that have happened in the last century. The most famous case is the horrifying accident of Chernobyl. This disaster began on the 26th of April of 1986 with the explosion of the number 4 reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This accident was followed by a reactor core fire which lasted until 4 of May of 1986, during which airborne radioactive contaminants were spread throughout the USSR and Europe. The consequences of this incident were the tragic death of 2 engineers and hospitalized 237 workers with severe burns. Of the hospitalized workers, 134 exhibited symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, and 28 of them died within the following 3 months. Not to mention the long-term impacts, such as high level of radiation around the area and lack of life, meaning flora and fauna. The second reason why I'm opposing today is the dangerous effect nuclear power has on human health. When we talk about nuclear power, it is important to mention radioactivity, which is in fact what causes terrible harm to human beings. Briefly, radioactivity is the property of certain materials to emit energy spontaneously, which is due to the nuclear instability of their nuclei. Taking into account evidence from catastrophic nuclear accidents such as Fukushima in Japan, or the one that I mentioned before, Chernobyl, these are some of the harms that radiation causes to humans. It can cause severe health effects, including skin burns and acute radiation syndrome. Nonetheless, it can also cause long-term health effects, such as cancer and cardiovascular diseases. While exposure to low levels of radiation present in the environment does not cause immediate health effects, it is a secondary general risk factor for cancer. All in all, it is necessary to mention that pregnant women and children are the most sensitive to radiation, since the cells of children and fetuses divide rapidly, thus providing more opportunities to radiation to disrupt processes and cause cellular damage, according to the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States. Proud to oppose, thank you.
Thank you, Madame de la Varga, right, for your interventions. Now I look to Madame Arroyo to close the case for the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President, distinguished speakers and friends, thank you for allowing me to take part in this debate. It is a considerable honor. The discussion surrounding nuclear power has been raised today, and in this debate, as the second speaker of the proposition, I will defend the notion that nuclear power is our best option for energy production. To do so, I will take into account its strengths regarding its capacity to meet the demands of current society and its evolution when it comes to safe and sustainable waste management. Let me come to my first argument that concerns the dependency of today's society on nuclear power. I do have to say that I cannot defend that nuclear power is our best option for the long-term future, but it surely is the best option right now, as it is the only possible answer. Since the creation of nuclear power, humans have been able to utilize it as an alternative and effective energy income, and some countries have even become dependent on it. In fact, we can find examples of this dependency all around the globe. France, for instance, obtains 78% of its electricity with nuclear power. Apart from that, countries like China or India, where the demand for electricity is suffering from a rapid and sudden growth, are failing to meet the energy demands by using renewable or fossil fuel energies only. As said by an article published by the IAEA Department of Nuclear Energy, India is expecting to generate 26% of its electricity with nuclear power by 2052, 23% more of its usage today. All of this with the objective of meeting the demands of the Indian population. It is also worth bearing in mind that growing populations are not the only reason why countries are dependent on nuclear power. Nuclear power is not only cheaper, but as previously mentioned by my partner, Madame Uriarte, creates less carbon emissions. Due to the alarming state of the environment today, Using low-emission energy production has been a priority for many countries in Europe, and renewable sources alone are not able to generate energy for all citizens, which leads these European countries to opt for nuclear power. All of this illustrates how we, as a society, are not able to let go of nuclear power straight away, not at least if we want to meet certain goals for sustainability and meet users' necessities. The last reason why we propose the notion that nuclear power is our best option for energy production is the evolution that the system is undergoing when it comes to waste management. It is a general belief that there is no possibility of creating nuclear power without it being unsafe and unsustainable, due to the alarming amount of radioactive waste that is created in the process. However, scientific discoveries have been able to identify changes that can be made in this system, altering the current situation. An illuminating example of this are thorium-based nuclear power plants. Thorium is a plentiful element on Earth. It can be found on Earth's crust 3 to 4 times more than uranium, which has led scientists to believe that thorium can be replaced by uranium, reducing the harms of nuclear power by doing so. Our main objective ever since the creation of nuclear power has been the ability to develop nuclear power plants that are safe and that create little nuclear waste, which thorium-based plants could be able to offer. As said by an article published by the NEA News, research carried out until now claims that the high radiation and heating created by the waste of nuclear power is not as prominent when using thorium-based plants. Therefore, using this element will help make waste management safer and more sustainable. By analyzing the progress of the recent scientific research, it is clear that humans would be able to find a way of reducing the harms of nuclear-powered energy, making it the best option for energy production. So, ladies and gentlemen, what have we told you today? Firstly, my partner, Madame Uriarte, explained how nuclear power is one of the energy sources with less carbon emission, and later made a comparison between accidents created by nuclear power and other industry incidents. Secondly, I told you that nuclear power is the only possible way to meet the energy demands of recent societies, and the only way to meet the established goals in favor of sustainability. Finally, I stated that scientific research regarding nuclear power is evolving rapidly, and therefore is decreasing the damage done by nuclear power day by day. It is for these reasons that the motion should stand. Proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Arroyo. Now I look to Madame Irigoyen Parate to close the case for the opposition.
Thank you, Madam President, and all the members of the House for allowing me to take part in this debate. It is a great honor for me to speak in this panel and close the case for the opposition. I also want to thank my honorable companions for their thought-provoking speeches. Now, moving to the motion, I'd like to present the last but not least reasons why my dear companion and I are opposing nuclear power as our best option for energy production. Let me come to my first argument. Nuclear power is too expensive. Unlike renewable energy sources, which are now the cheapest energy sources, nuclear costs are on the rise, and many plants are being shut down or in danger of being shut down for economic reasons. According to the World Nuclear Industry Status Report, nuclear energy costs between $112 and $189 per megawatt hour, whereas the cost of generating solar power ranges for $36 to $44 per megawatt hour, while onshore wind power comes in at $26 to $56 per megawatt hour. In addition, the World Nuclear Status Report has estimated that over the past decade, costs for solar energy have dropped by the 88% and for wind by the 69%. According to the same report, these costs have increased by the 23% for nuclear power. According to a November 2021 study released by Greenpeace France and the Rousseau Institute, power from the under-construction European pressurized reactor at Flamanville in France would be 3 times less expensive as the country's most competitive renewable energy sources. Other extra waste in the cost of the major nuclear meltdowns in history. For example, the estimated cost to clean up the damage of the Fukushima nuclear reactor core meltdowns was $4,600 to $6,400 billion. In addition, there is an extra cost of storing nuclear waste for hundreds of thousands of years. In the US alone, $500 million are spent yearly to safeguard nuclear waste. The second argument why I oppose nuclear power is the risk of nuclear weapon proliferation. Even though the link between nuclear weapons and nuclear power is often denied by the nuclear energy industry, the growth of nuclear energy has historically increased the ability of nations to obtain or harvest plutonium or enrich uranium to manufacture nuclear weapons. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recognizes this fact. They concluded in the executive summary of their 2014 reports on energy with, and I quote, robust evidence and high agreement that nuclear weapons proliferation concern is a barrier and a risk to the increasing development of nuclear energy. The building of a nuclear reactor for energy in a country that does not currently have a reactor allows the country to import uranium for use in the nuclear energy facility. But if the country so chooses, it can secretly enrich the uranium to create weapons-grade uranium and harvest plutonium for use in nuclear weapons. This does not mean any or every country will do this, but historically some have, and the risk is very high. Finally, to conclude my speech, I would like to do a little recap of what my honorable mate, Ms. de la Varga, and I, the opposition speakers, have said. My companion discussed the environmental impact of nuclear energy, highlighting three significant factors: the prolonged and damaging construction process of nuclear plants, the substantial production of toxic waste, and the vulnerability of these plants leading to a potential danger. The argument concludes by emphasizing the historical vulnerability of nuclear plants, citing the Chernobyl disaster of 1986 as a tragic example with the immediate and long-term impacts of human life and the surrounding environment. Moreover, she focused on the adverse effects of nuclear power on human health, particularly due to radioactivity. Again, drawing evidence from the catastrophic nuclear accidents like Fukushima and Chernobyl. She outlined the immediate and long-term health effects of radiation exposure, including skin burns, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases. Then I argued that nuclear power is economically impractical, not just because of the waste of its use, that it can get to be 6 times higher than some renewable energy sources, but also because the economic burden that supposes its maintenance. Finally, I defend that despite the nuclear energy industry's denial of a direct link between nuclear weapons and nuclear power, the growth of nuclear energy has historically increased the ability of nations to have an easier access to nuclear weapons, creating another danger for humanity. So it's time we see that nuclear energy has no place in a safe, clean, and sustainable future. It is more important than ever that we steer away from false solutions and leave nuclear power in the past. So I would urge you to vote with the opposition today. Pro to oppose? Thank you.